record button, that'd be great. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jen Wilson, and I'm the Director of Programming and Advocacy with the Museum Association. And I'm so happy to have you here today joining us for our very first for this year Presenter 101 and Accessibility 101 series. So we are recording this so we can send out to folks. If you have fellow presenters who are interested in attending another one of these sessions, we're holding them all summer and into the early fall. We're trying to make sure we're making this as easy and accessible for all of our presenters. So give me 1 sec as I share my screen. All right, and I'll ask for a thumbs up if everybody can see that. Yes, yay, thanks, Charlotte. All right, so I'm gonna do the speaker thing. I'm not gonna be able to see you, so we will have a Q&A section at the end, so. All right, so presentation and accessibility 101. First and foremost, thank you for being presenters this year. We had a record number of submissions. We had, I believe, 132 was our final count. And that exceeds what we even had before COVID. And conferences as good as what our speakers present and what they put out into the community. So we're very excited. We'll have probably about 85 or so sessions this year, and it's all because of you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your hard work, and thank you for jumping on in and presenting what you're doing to the larger NEMA community. So for today, I've broken this down into 4 different sections. So we have prep work, so things to consider as you're planning your presentation and you're gearing up through the summer and fall. So things to consider and ways to start maybe building your presentation. Sharing is caring, so some quick tips on how to deliver your content day of. I'll share my contact information. I think you all have it, but I'll share it again just so you know, cover all my bases, and then we'll leave some room at the end for a Q&A. All right, so first up is prep work. So presentations are as much about the speakers as they are about the audience. So I wanted to say that up front because presenting at conference is a wonderful professional development opportunity. It's a great thing to have in your resume to kind of say like, oh, I've done this, you know, especially if you're afraid of public speaking, to get up in front of a room of people and say like, oh, I've presented about like this amazing project I've been working on for the past year. That being said, the presentation is as much about what the audience is absorbing from your work. So it's kind of a 50-50 split. It's what you're putting out and the energy you're putting out into the world, and it's about how that's being received from your audience. So I just want to put that in the back of everybody's mind. And I'll say that because I know I once had a volunteer at a museum who he thought his tours were about him. So he would like to lead 3 or 4 hour tours of a historic house. Yes, 3 or 4 hours. So it was always a constant, like your tour is about you giving this information, but it's also about what your audience needs from you. So with that in mind, I always like to think roughly about the speaker side of things and the audience side of things. So as you're considering your presentation, think about what your goal is. Is it to inspire, to create dialogue? Is it a call to action? Are you sharing best practices? What's that kind of that key mission? If somebody were to ask you like, you know, why are you doing this presentation? And you had to answer in 1 sentence, what would the action verb in that be? What is the thing that you're trying to impart to your audience? What is the summation of this, you know, 60 or 90-minute presentation that you're doing?
And then also, really,
yeah.
Go Scarlett. I was gonna say, can you click the expand mode? It looks like the speaker presentation isn't advancing correctly.
Oh, where are you? Hold on. I'm so sorry.
We can see the Canva main page, but we can't see the expanded version on like slide 4.
Oh, interesting. I'm so sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I sorry.
Nope, it's okay. Let me see if I can.
If you click, yeah, if you click the expand, yeah.
No, I did. It's expanded on my side, so I'm sorry about that. And now Canva does not want to react. The joys of technology. All right, let me just stop sharing for 1 second. My apologies, folks. All right, so. Oh, I always love the, how do you want to rate Canva's presenting experience? Not in this moment, I don't want to rate it.
And as Brianna chimes in the chat, saying there's always a technical issue. So this is good practice, right? So in the event that when folks are presenting.
Yes.
We used to like to say
Alright.
that, can you give your presentation by candlelight?
Yes. All right, so can we see a full screen now?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that looks great.
Okay.
We're on, it looks like
Yeah.
sharing is caring. Yep.
All right. Let me jump back a couple. So sorry about that, folks. All right, so let's see how this goes. Okay, great. So, for your speakers, for the speaker section, what are the things that you want to impart for your audience, but then also what are the things that are going to best support you in giving your fantastic presentation? And that could be anything. It could be, what are the things that you rely on? Is it having a paper copy of your presentation so you can flip through it so it's not on a screen like this in case something goes wrong? Is it having written notes for yourself? Is it frankly is it wearing like the best outfit that you have because you feel the most confident? Think about the things that are going to really enhance your experience as a speaker, things that are going to make you less fidgety, right? So those things that's like, I'm just going to do this, I'm going to take care of this in advance. And then on the audience side, what I often ask speakers to think about are what are the three takeaways? Like, what are three ideas or tangible projects that people can do that you would like your audience to leave with? And then how can you facilitate those takeaways for all of your audience members? We'll talk about the how do you facilitate those takeaways for all attendees as we go through this presentation. I'm gonna let my dog out of my office. I'll be right back. He likes to keep me company until he doesn't. So, as you're building your presentation for conference, if you're making a slideshow, which a lot of people do, think about the content that you're putting on the screen. So for your text, less is better. So focus on the key points that support your goal. I think we've all been in those presentations where somebody will effectively put all of their personal notes on the slide and use their slide as their own notes of how they're going to talk. And we've all seen that where you're just like, do I listen to the person speaking or do I read all of this? And it's that kind of that intellectual disconnect. So focus on your key points, have your notes separate in whatever manner feels comfortable. But really, what are the things that are going to support what you're talking about and really allow people to read it really quickly while also hearing you explain? I'm a big fan of road mapping. I've been a walking tour guide for a long time, and I have found that people love to know where they're going. So I find giving that quick outline at the beginning will really help people understand, like, okay, so we're starting at the beginning. I don't know anything about this content, but here are some things that we're going to learn about. And that takes away some of the fear and anxiety as an attendee of a session like this. And for some folks, it also helps them start to think of like, how do I do my note-taking process? How do I set up and structure, the way I'm going to comprehend this? And like, do I start kind of like out my notebook now? Or do I kind of start planning ahead of like, oh, here are some things that maybe connect to my site. So road mapping allows people to start navigating on their own, and allows them to really just be with you for the journey. And then what's the point? I had said this earlier, don't put a wall of text up. Really hone in on what you need the people to see. I also find that sometimes that wall of text means that like people are trying to take a picture of it and sometimes read it on their phone. Hone in on really what's important and crucial to your presentation. And then when it comes to content regarding audio and visual, if you are planning on using a video or a Zoom, so we do have some speakers who are Zoom calling in, plan on using closed captioning. So we'll talk about this a little bit later on about why these are important, but if you're using a video, if you're pulling up a YouTube thing, make sure the closed captioning is available. That will help people who are hard of hearing or deaf be able to engage with that content. Also people, I think we've all seen and experienced like a lot of things on social media are now closed caption. I think that culture is kind of going to this, like we're relying on both visuals and text to support it. I think that's a very common thing that we're seeing. So just, you know, if you're building stuff out now as you're planning for your session, just enable those features. As you're putting together your presentation, if you want to embed pictures, I would suggest using pictures that are inherently supporting your goal. So I think like we have the tendency of like, oh, I want to have this, you know, this slide, it has like 15 different photos on it. That can be visually very difficult for some people to comprehend. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of context that may not be obvious to the outside observer, to an outside attendee. So remember that it may make sense to you, but it may not make sense to the outside person. So really, again, hold in on those things that are really going to drive home your point. I would also suggest using alternative text. So alternative text is text that describes the appearance or the function of your photo. So it could be an image of, let's say it's a dog barking and just wearing a green harness. Automatically, you can have that text support the image. So then somebody who may not be able to see the image can start to visualize that in their head. So it allows that access to an image in a number of different ways. And then finally for graphs, if you are using graphs, just make sure they're easy to comprehend and then keep it to relevant data. So supporting your point, graphs can be really wonderful and really useful as long as they don't need a lot of explaining and deciphering. So think about what is the driving point of using that type of visual aid, and make sure that you can explain it clearly and concisely in your presentation. And that's for everybody. Not everybody can read visual data easily or quickly. So make sure that like you practice in advance, like I have this graph and it explains this, this, and this is why I'm presenting it to you. All right, and then the actual structure of presentations. I'd recommend using a large font, at least 28 point. That can seem, I've talked to people that seems both big and small. So I recommend at least a 28 point. I'd say you can even go up to 32, depending on how much space that you have in your presentation. Also use a font that's sans serif. So Helvetica and Arial, I believe this is Helvetica. Visually, eyes have to do more work, literally, to comprehend serif fonts. So serifs are like the S or the N has like a little hat on it, if you will. Or an F has like a little like hat or a little like, you know, extra zhuzh on it, if that makes sense. So sans serif fonts just means that's easier in the eyes. Attendees are attending conference for 3 days, potentially. They're looking at a lot of different presentations. I think we've all been, you know, used to staring at screens and we start to feel that eye fatigue. So this is a way to allow attendees to not have to like do that extra work that they're not even conscious of. When it comes to colors for your font, I recommend high contrast. So a light background, you can use like a very stark white. I'm using ivory in this case. It's a little bit softer, and then a dark text. It doesn't have to be exactly, oops, so sorry about that. Doesn't have to be exactly black and white. I'm using in this case an ivory and a dark purple, right? But it's a good high contrast so you can read the two. Some people do like to use a dark background and a light text. I know personally that works for me sometimes, but not all the time. So I recommend light background, dark text. And then avoid large amounts of red text or yellow background. Those can be very visually jarring for people, and that can create a lot of eye strain. Don't be afraid of white space. So for spacing, the more the better. 1.5 or 2 points between lines is great. So I think on this presentation, I have probably like a 1.75. Again, that allows people to read the lines clearly and concisely, especially if they're at a distance. So I know like I need glasses to see at a distance. I often forget mine and I tend to sit in the back of the room. Faux pas all around on my part. So that means reading something that's really chunky and squished together is hard. And that's just to be aware of like who your audience members are and what they're bringing to the space with them. And then some just general reminders for presentation. Save your presentation in multiple spaces and in multiple copies. If you are presenting with a lot of different people and you all have different computers, put them on each computer, save them to a cloud and or a thumb drive. I recommend that presenters have their presentation in 2 different spots just in case. I know that sometimes I can lose track of time, which I did because of my little technical snafu with my dog. But what I like to recommend is using a clock app on my phone or on your phone. So right now I'm using something called nighttime. So literally my phone is sitting right next to me, and the screen's just on permanently with the time. So that way I can kind of keep casually looking at it without having to look at my watch, without having to turn it on. It just sits there. So I have that visual cue like, oh, yep, okay, it's 12:19. I know I have to speed up a little bit. I will remind you again and again and again, do not forget your chargers for your computers. They're important. We had one speaker who unfortunately forgot his charger last year and had to last minute go out and buy one because we could not find anybody that had a similar charger. It was an extra stress that he didn't need. Also, if you're using a Mac product, I'll remind everybody to bring an HDMI converter dongle, and I'll send a link for that in the future. Our AV company will have HDMI cables, but that doesn't necessarily connect to Macs easily. Notifications on your phone, it's really, it can be distracting for yourself, and you're just like, oh, my husband's texting me about dinner tonight. Just mute the notifications on your phone. It's a quick heads up. It takes literally half a second. And I was thinking about this today. Make sure that you check your software updates at least 24 hours in advance. I had a friend who was supposed to do a presentation this week, actually, and then her laptop, when she opened it, was self-healing. Literally the image that it showed on it, and it was at 17%. She's like, I was not expecting this. So just make sure if you need to do a software update, or if you just want to check that in advance, just to be sure. You don't want to wake up the morning of and go like, it's 6 o'clock and I have to be giving a 9 a.m. presentation and my computer is maybe going to cooperate today or not. So try to just take care of the things that you can leading up to conference. All right, so sharing is caring. Some delivery how-tos for day of. All right, so don't make assumptions about who is in the room. I was having a conversation with somebody and they were like, why do you need to describe an image if you only have one person who is visually impaired? And it's like, you don't know if it's just one person. It may be one person that's presenting that way, but you may have a number of people in the room who would rely on a narrative of what an image means. So make sure that you're just covering your bases and you're thinking like, anybody and everybody in this space could use any of the things that I'm providing. All right, so some better practices, because I think for accessibility, we're always moving forward. We're always thinking and considering what's best. So I don't have a microphone, but I will demonstrate with the kitchen spoon in a second. Use a microphone. Every room at conference will have at least 2 microphones available. Use them. They are important. These rooms for conference this year are particularly large, so we're expecting most spaces to seat anywhere between, I'm expecting our smallest room to seat about 50 people and our largest room to seat probably about 300. Even if you think you're a loudspeaker, use the microphone. I'm a loudspeaker. I always know that I still have to use it because you want to make sure everybody can hear what you're talking about. For your microphone, have it closer than you think. So again, we're going to sub in a spoon for a microphone in the situation. I think we're so used to on social media right now seeing people use lavalier mics. So they're those like little tiny mics that usually go on your collar. Those mics are super sensitive, so they can pick up audio from here to your mouth very easily. We're going to have handheld mics at the conference. They are not as sensitive. So what you see on social media about somebody like using their lavalier mic and they're kind of floating it, that's not necessarily the case here. So when you have a mic at conference, you're going to want to have it closer to you than you think. It's going to feel like it's like right on your lips, like you're almost eating it. I know that that's uncomfortable. I know that that's not something anybody wants to feel like, but it's going to feel like you're like almost touching the microphone to your mouth because the microphone is not as sensitive. You do want to get it pretty close. I also tell people like, if you can't hear me, let me know. It's always fine to do a check-in. It's always, more than welcome for people to say like, hey, I'm in the back, I can't hear you. Because sometimes we float too, right? Like sometimes we do the back and forth where we're far from the microphone and then we get closer. So sometimes having the audience kind of help you monitor that's fine. So don't worry about that. Just encourage, like, if you can't hear me, just raise your hand, let me know. Speak at a comfortable, measured pace. I know I'm a very fast speaker. I've been called out several times in my life for it. Remind yourself to breathe, just slow down. It's okay. You're not going as slow as you think you are. I know we also have the tendency to sometimes especially as first-time presenters, to get really nervous and amped up. Take a deep breath in. It's okay. Just slow down so that way people can comprehend you and take notes at an appropriate pace. As you're presenting, face the audience and refrain from covering your mouth. There are several people who will probably be at conference who are relying on you for a number of different reasons to face the audience. One, it's you're clearer in your projection that way. But two, also, if you cover your mouth, anybody who's relying on reading your lips, they can't have access to that. And that's for people who are not native speakers. So they're relying on that visual cue of how your face is moving to help decipher what you're saying. It's also for anybody who's hard of hearing or deaf. They're going to rely on some of those visual cues of your face. So remember to face your audience as much as possible. Sometimes we have the tendency to say, like, the screen is over here. Let me look at it this way. You lose access in that situation. So try to have notes for yourself. You can kind of look up in gestures, see where you're at, but try to face the audience as much as possible. That also being said, don't block the on-screen captioning interpreter. Sometimes we get a little movement and kinetic action when we're speaking. Sometimes we want to float around as a presenter. If that's the case, make sure you're not standing in front of the screen, especially during a video. Make sure that anything that's on screen is visible to your audience. And then last but not least, repeat questions back to the group. It's a really simple thing. It both helps you confirm that you comprehend the question so you can answer appropriately, but also the audience probably won't have a microphone. So it's an opportunity for you to repeat back to everybody, considering you have a mic. So everybody knows what's being asked. So then they have context for your answer. All right. If you are using images for your presentation, just give a brief description. It can be one sentence. That's that alt text situation. So it gives that context of what is happening in the image. So anybody who can't see the image or can't access it or needs some clarification, it just gives them, like, okay, well, here's what's going on. I also suggest giving a synopsis of the video before playing. Again, it's that context before somebody's engaging with the content. That can help anybody who can't necessarily see or access visually the video to comprehend, like, okay, well, I'm going to start to hear some audio and it's going to be related to this. Also, for other folks, if they're starting to take some notes, it helps them also kind of understand, like, okay, so here's how this is going to fit into our presentation. If you are having your room, engage with you in a physical manner, you may want to say, I'm asking the room a question. Okay, so we have about 100 people in the room. Gives that visualization of, like, who's in the space, and about half of them are raising their hands. So we have about 50 people in the room. If you are walking around and you're gesturing to tables, you may want to say, like, I'm at the back of the room and we have a table of 10 people who do this. So that way, somebody who may not be able to see you or track you visually can have at least that access to understanding where you are in relation to space and who's present around them. And then finally, if you have multiple speakers in a Q&A, just state your name really quickly before answering. So it can be like, oh, I'm going to answer this question. I'm Jen Wilson from NEMA, da, 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 da. So that way people can start to follow the organization from, in a multi-voice session, they can follow the organization from, like, okay, this person's talking from this place, that person is giving context from here. If they can't necessarily see you, if they're at the back of the room, they can't see what's going on. And then gentle reminders for nervous speakers. This first line, introduce yourself silly. I have done walking tours for a long time. And when I was putting together, I make scripts for myself. And the first few walking tours I did, I forgot to introduce myself. It's a silly quirk that I have. I forget to do it. I just assume that everybody knows what's going on. So I started building in introduce yourself silly. And for me, it was a funny joke. it was just a way for me to kind of like, okay, I'm gonna ground myself. Here's my little note to myself that like makes me feel like, and it makes me smile. And I'll say this, I have several friends now who they know this about me. So when they make their scripts and they make their notes, this is sometimes the header. So like, give yourself those little things that are going to be the cue to remind you of your important points, but also they're kind of like, oh, okay, like that's for me. That this is my presentation. Let me ground myself. Again, pace yourself. As nervous speakers, sometimes we can get really amped up and start to do like a lot of the fluttery, like, I like to call it like the throat voice, the like, oh, I'm talking from like up here instead of breathing and talking from the chest. I also have a theater background if you can't tell. So just give yourself like, just take a deep breath, allow yourself to like, really sink in, your content, you're an expert at this. Like we accepted your session because it's amazing. We want you there to give this content. Just, take a deep breath and slow down. You're okay. And those pauses will feel like they're a lot longer to you than they are to your audience. And then last but not least, I always remind people of this, give yourself a lot of grace. You're doing something big and amazing. There's a good chance you're going to have like 100 people in your room. They want to be there to support you. They want to hear what you're saying. Be vulnerable. I often say, make people laugh with you so you can break the tension. I remember giving a presentation once. I was on a bus. It was my first bus tour, and I was kneeling on a seat facing the bus. So I was moving backwards, and I had a microphone like wedged here. And I just at one point I was like, I'm so sorry, guys. I've never done this before. And I'm sweating through my blazer. The whole bus laughed. And that just broke that tension. And it was like, okay, great. They gave me a lot of grace. And I was able to give myself a lot of grace. So just allow yourself to be human. You're with all these colleagues from across the region, and they're here to support you. They want to know what you're doing. And they want to connect with you. And really, in the end, they're your friends and allies. All right, so this is my contact information. You can reach me at either conference@nemanet.org or jennifer.wilson@nemanet.org. I have emailed you already as presenters. I will be emailing you ad nauseum this year, so you will see me again via email quite a bit. And it's 12:30 exactly, so I apologize. We're going to open up for Q&A if anybody has any questions. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all your wonderful faces. So how are we feeling? What are the big questions, comments, concerns? Hi, Michelle. I recognize that office so well. Hi.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Hey, I just wanted to ask you a question in terms of like any best practices that you could recommend, because one of the things that we want to do during our session is to have the participants model one of the techniques that we're going to be advising them about in terms of like developing lessons and resources. So in terms of doing an activity where you may have to like distribute materials or get people to work together, is there anything that you've experienced that you would say is a best practice for that? I'm just going to go off of my classroom teaching experience otherwise.
I was going to say, I think you have plenty of experience as a classroom teacher. I would let people know in advance as you're beginning the session that this is a collaborative, participative presentation, and that they will be working with other people probably at their tables. I would also recommend, if you're having people work together, utilize the space. I'm a big fan of that. Sometimes being at a table can be a little overwhelming. If you're at a full table, try and have a conversation with the person. I'm assuming like you're doing like a pair share situation where it's like you and like one person talking with the person next to them. Allow people to get up and move and encourage them to do that. So the rooms are pretty significantly large, but like allow people to venture off across the room into the hallway space and tell them how much time they have to work together. That's also something I find really helpful. Like, okay, so we're going to take this opportunity to talk for about 10 minutes. Feel free to move around the space, claim a different spot, head out into the hallway. But we'll meet back here. And I always like to give people a hard time. So I'm like, okay, so we have 10 minutes, 12:33 right now. We're going to meet at 12:43. So people have that hard understanding of what time is. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Awesome. Hi, Leslie.
Hi. I had another question, but actually the one that was just asked I'm going to ask a follow-up to that.
Yeah, of course.
If we're doing something that we'll be asking some participation, do you have any suggestions for ways where if people don't want to participate or are shy or the introverts out there, how to make them comfortable so they can either not participate or they may choose to at their comfort level?
Yeah, of course. So I will say, so I come from an education background, so I always gently will say to people, like, I will outwait you, so I can always wait for an answer. That's something that I jokingly throw out there, not because I want to pressure people, but because it's a way for me to break the ice. Also, give people a little bit more time than you expect for them to answer. So I say that I had a colleague who would ask a question, wait probably literally, and I say this, about 25 to 30 seconds, wouldn't get an answer, would get anxious, and then just start filling in what the answer was. You know, people are listening to you, they're comprehending what you're asking, they're starting to make the connections of what they experience professionally, how they want to respond to you, they're formulating, especially for people who are shy, who are introverted. English isn't their first language, like any of those factors, give them an extra beat. It may feel long, but it's not. And I also, you know, I try never to call on people unless I have a plant in the audience. Sometimes I have done that for presentations where I'm like, great, you're my colleague, you know what I'm going to ask, and you're prepped with an answer. You don't have to do that. I'm not saying put a plant in the audience. Sometimes it does help though. But yeah, give them an extra beat, and then also say, like, I always like to tell people, like, what are you thinking, what are you feeling? There's no right or wrong answer. I think that also that comes from a very emotional point of view, that we think that we have to be right, and it can be very nervous to be in a room of like 50 to 100 people going like, oh, am I gonna mess this up, like, am I gonna embarrass myself? And just say, like, nope, yeah, you know, there's no right or wrong answer. What are you feeling? What are you emoting? What's your gut reaction? I tell people also, you don't have to have it formulated. If you need to talk out a little bit of what you're saying, like you have that grain of an idea, just start talking it out, because that's going to affect the next person too. That's like sitting right next to you. That may change their view. Like, don't hide what you're trying to answer. And I find all of those tactics really help.
I'd say too,
yeah.
another tool that I've seen utilized well is using like
Yeah.
postcards or note cards for folks who maybe just want to engage in a different way, or maybe don't feel quite ready to use their voice in a big crowd. That can be an easy tool to just be like, I put note cards on the table, you know, I can collect them in 5 minutes, or you know, hand them up to me if you'd like. Just like taking the pressure off people to have to announce themselves if they don't want to.
Yeah. Thank you, Scarlett. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah.
My original question then was, alt text. I actually have never used it for a presentation. Is that something that is like built into PowerPoint, or is there?
Yeah. So kind of like, what is alt text and how do you develop it? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah. So alt text is a really simple, basic description of what's happening visually within an image. So you can find, and happy to send this out, you can find tools and resources that are like ways to guide you through writing alt text. Usually it's 1 to 3 sentences that gives you context of, like, you know, here's an image of a white woman in her 30s with brown hair that's shoulder length and glasses. Oh, thank you, Scarlett. And that gives you a sense of what is happening within the image, along with some action in there too. It does not have to be a fully descriptive, like 2-page description, but it's a little bit of context so people can start to build the visual idea in their head, and then that gives them some access to what's happening. So they're on the same playing fields of everybody else. And it's a practice. I mean, definitely take some time. Thank you, Scarlett. Scarlett is our resource maven. She's always dropping links in the chat for all of us. It takes some time. I'm glad that you're here in June. It's still June. So you can start the process, and let me know if you need any help in anything. I'm here at NEMA as your resource. So really, like, send me emails. If you want to have a Zoom call, I'm always happy to take a one-on-one and chat things through. I'm happy to like look at your alt text and your notes in advance and give recommendations. So yeah.
So much.
Yeah, of course. All right. What else are things? What else are we thinking? Thinking, feeling, considering? You can drop it in the chat. You can also send me an email later too.
I'd say another fun tool for everybody to think about is the app too, where you know, I think Jen's given you incredible tools to how you structure your presentation and thinking through. And as we get closer to conference, I know Jen will kind of share more resources around the app, and it'll be on our website. But if you are having a participatory you know, session or meetup or something, you can post in the app being like, here are some fun things to think about in advance of this session. It's almost like text
Yeah.
messaging or Slack, but that's another tool in
Yeah.
the tool belt for like advanced engagement or post session engagement.
Yep. Are we feeling pretty good? I see some chatter happening. I want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. You're also always more than welcome to email me. I am on my email nonstop. Literally, I'm always checking it. So I try my best to get back within a couple of days if possible, especially if it's you know, a super easy question or scheduling a meeting. So. All right. Well, if we're okay, I was gonna say I got the thumbs up. Great. So if we're feeling okay, we're about 10 minutes over, so I want to respect everybody's time. I appreciate that. You're gonna hear from me again all summer long, all fall long. I'm sorry because I will get annoying. I know. But we're so excited. I just want to make sure you all as speakers feel supported. Feel free to be in touch with me or anybody on Team NEMA staff. We are here as resources for you to make sure that you have a great conference experience. All right. Thanks, everybody. Stay cool out there. Have a happy and safe 4th of July next week, and we'll see you in November in Newport.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.